Hi, David. Thank you for being here with me today.
Hi, Sheryl. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So, tell us about your journey of how you became and realized you were a poet. You had mentioned to me a darkness meditation retreat you attended and reading The Third Door by Alex Banayan. Please tell us more about that.
I read Alex's book, The Third Door, in 2019, and that book really just opened my mind to what was possible. I knew that the 9 to 5 path wasn't for me anymore at that point, but I didn't know what to do, and so it wasn't until poetry that I got my why, and that didn't come until 2 years later, and this was July 2021. That's when I did the darkness retreat. So I wrote my first poem in March 2021. So just a few months before that, I had just discovered it, and it was taking over like my life. And I felt called to do this darkness retreat. And this is you're by yourself, and it's a pitch black room. Um, and it's essentially you're just in there with your thoughts. And I've always been terrified of the dark. And so in a lot of ways, it was me facing that ultimate fear. And what I know now, I think now like darkness is a euphemism for death in some ways, and I think that's what we're really afraid of, the absence of light in life.
Yes.
um but anyway, so it was in this darkness retreat that I took um I kind of got validated in confidence as a poet. I was in there for 3 nights, and at one point I did a who am I meditation, where I just sit there and I just keep asking myself, who am I? Who am I? And it was just so funny because, like we're taught when we meditate, you got to get the thoughts out of there so you can focus.
Yes.
And so I kept having like rhymes and lines and like poems come to my head. And I was like, get the hell out of here. Like, I need to meditate. Who am I? Who am I? And after like 20 minutes or so, it felt like much longer, but it just hit me over the head. It's like, oh, I'm a poet. And like as soon as I proclaimed it and said it and realized it, it felt like I had the biggest hug I've ever received. And I think I probably started crying too. I'm sure I did. But and it's like that's what I came for. Like that's what was calling me. I needed to come and get confidence in myself um as a poet. But excuse me. What was funny is that it wasn't still until a year after that, when Alex Benayan had the mentor session in person. He invited everyone. He's like, let's just all network and come and hang out and have a cool weekend together. And so this was in July 22, just earlier this summer. So it was about a year after the darkness retreat. And I had just quit my sales job in May of this year. And that was the first time I introduced myself to people as a poet.
Mm.
I'm in this room with entrepreneurs and founders, and there's some doctors, there's a magician in there, and I'm like, it would have been really easy to cling to my sales background, like, oh, that's their language, like, yeah, we're cool. But instead, I was just like, no, I'm a poet. And it was so empowering because I was expecting to like try to start justifying myself and to see the eye rolls, and but it was none of that. Everyone was just like, wow, that's so cool. Like, oh, wow. And everyone was so warm and accepting. And I was like, whoa, this is what life can be like when you're with like minded people, but also just proclaim who you are and what you're supposed to do. And it's been funny because when I've had friends realize that I'm a poet now, it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's like, why did no one ever tell me this?
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And so, in a lot of ways, in retrospect, I've been saying and I've learned that I have been a poet my whole life. It just took me almost 3 decades to find the pen, and so nothing has changed about the way I interact with the world or experience the world or the people in my life. Now I just have a way to express it. And so with
Yes.
that, I'm like not codependent anymore on needing someone to share all of this with. And so um, yeah, it's coming into this power as a poet for myself has really been probably one of the most liberating things I've done.
Yes. It took me a while to tell people that I was an artist because I did it as a hobby for so long when I was younger. And I just never could say that. And when I finally did, it felt so liberating. And like, this is part of me. This is who I am.
Did you notice that more doors started opening up for you?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Once I started to step into that and it started to help me gain more confidence. And it felt great. And I want to go back to the whole darkness retreat. Uh, if everyone told me, try this, I would be like, no. And I love retreats.
That was the reaction I got from people when I told them I was doing a darkness retreat.
And yeah, how did that work? Like, were you in a room for three, like,
Oh,
were there a
yeah.
certain number of hours you were in there? And yeah,
I
like,
guess I glossed over that pretty quickly, huh? so, so yeah, it was in a retreat center in Oaxaca, Mexico, and it
I've
was
heard
a
so many good things about Oaxaca.
oh, it was amazing. I definitely want to go back. Um, but it was a yoga retreat center. There were people there doing like a silent retreat, and so the darkness retreat was one person, and it was one like studio, I guess you could say, like a small hotel room. Um, and so there was like Velcro, and all the windows were boarded up, so all light was eliminated. I had a bathroom, I had a bed, there was water in there for me, there were fans. They told me that there would be AC, but when I got there, like, oh, it's broken. And immediately I was like, that's probably part of the shindig. You're not going to come to a darkness retreat with AC. Get out of here, you know? And so um yeah, and there's like a they created this way where they can give you food without introducing light. So in the mornings they'll knock, and then they open it from the outside, put the food in, and then I'll once they knock again to tell me it's closed, I'll go and open it from my side and just grab the food. And
And so you
so
would eat in the dark as
yes,
well?
I would just
Wow.
eat and sit on this meditation pillow. I felt like, like when dogs get their food and they just go to the little corner, and that's what I felt like.
Oh,
And so I would just sit there in the dark and just like, okay, what's for breakfast? And it was a vegan diet, so you'd have to worry about like bones or anything like
yeah.
that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But so it was oatmeal. And in one of the mornings, so I was there, it was supposed to be 72 hours, about 3 nights. I left at 60 hours because I went in a day later than I anticipated. And if I had stayed in the whole time, I would have had to go straight to the airport after
Mm,
getting out. And I was like, no, I don't want that. I need a night to like transition. And by
yeah.
then I felt like I got what I wanted. I felt like I got what I needed already, that I was a poet, and just the ultimate confidence in myself is really what I got. Um, yeah. And so that was pretty much it. And so I'm just there eating, and a pineapple had never tasted so good before. Because I thought it was regular oatmeal, and then all of a sudden I chew into a pineapple, and it was better than cheesecake at that moment. I was like, this is the best
Wow.
thing in the world, and it just made my whole day. Um,
It reminds me of eating in the dark. You know those restaurants? Have you ever heard of them?
no, no, they're onto
Yeah, they have
something then.
restaurants where you can eat in the dark, and people who are blind are the waiters. And yeah, you're
Wow.
basically experiencing what they go through, and it heightens your senses, obviously. So
Yeah.
it makes sense what you're saying. And I'm
Um,
sure that's the whole theory behind it, heightening everything, because we are so inundated by everything that's coming to us from the world, especially with these phones and social media and all that, to get that time, just like the silent retreats, which I
yes.
had an interview with, Asa,
Yeah.
and her talking about Vipassana and all that. It makes
I,
sense to
I don't know
do
if I'd be able to do a silent
like
retreat, so I'll give her props for that.
yeah, 10 days.
That's a very long time. And it's funny that you bring up the blind people, because um oddly enough, that was always a fascination I had, even when I was younger. It's like, what would it be like to be blind? I had even thought of like doing an experiment and like doing a fundraiser, like people just blind themselves for a week, and just it's like just to bring awareness, see what it's like, because you don't know what it's like until you're there.
Yes.
And so I guess this is a cool thing I didn't mention. So when I first get there, there's a guide and he goes over some breathing techniques with you just to make sure you're ready to go in. And there's a candle, and he said you're free to light it out whenever you'd like. You can blow it out tomorrow morning and have your first night with the candle. It's really, this is your experience. So after he left, I start getting into like panic mode, and like I need to make sure I know where everything is, so I know where to get it. This backpack's here, the water's here, all this is here. And so in the midst of all of this like panic and chaos in my mind, I just heard a whisper, and it was like, just blow it out, like just blow it out right now. And so I did. And so I just stopped what I was doing. I was like, okay, fuck it. So I just blew it. And that was like the first big hug that I got.
Mm.
How I mentioned when I said I was a poet, it was just like I was just consumed the second the flame went out. And so that's when I knew. I was like, yeah, I definitely came to the right place. This is absolutely where I need to be.
I love that. I love that story. I've never heard of a darkness retreat, so I'm very fascinated by it. Always learning new things. Uh, so you also have a love for monarch butterflies. I love them as well. They're very symbolic for me. Can you go deeper into that and what they symbolize for you?
Yeah. So man, they symbolize so much. I honestly don't even know where to start. Um, but in a lot of ways, they've been symbolizing my heritage. And I'm in a place right now where I currently believe it's like they're my ancestors calling me back to Mexico. So every year the monarchs they migrate to Michoacan, Mexico. And this is a bird level migration. But they're insects. And so it's like unheard of. What they do is a miracle, and we just gloss over it. The equivalent for a human is to walk around the globe 11 times.
Wow.
And so it's like, whoa, like the stacks are just against them every step of the way. Um, and so what first really captured me with monarchs is milkweed, is the plant that they eat for protection, for energy. And what I didn't know is that monarchs and milkweed, they've essentially kind of been having this arms race throughout their existence. The plant is constantly trying to kill off the butterflies, and the butterflies continue to adapt and use it for protection and for energy. And so it's like they're intertwined. And in that metaphor to me really spoke to me about the poison that we consume, and how much of that is our protection, and how much of it is our demise. And it's in the dose. You have to perfect the dose. The dose, everyone has different doses. And so for me, I'm exploring milkweed being all the vices we have with alcohol, smoking, food, gambling, whatever it is. And so that was like the first thing that really got me lost into that. I was like, wow, like I'm chilling all this milkweed, and I got to figure out how to like transform it. And the other really cool thing though is when they go to Mexico, their arrival tends to coincide with Day of the Dead, with Dia de los Muertos. And so all the communities around there, they believe that it's their ancestors coming back, or it's like a lost child along the way, or a premature death, something like that. And so even before the monarchs, I'd been fascinated with Day of the Dead and going back to Mexico. I think since 2018, I've been going to Mexico almost every year, except through 2020, obviously. But yeah, and so that's what I'm writing my first poetry book about. I'm trying to um, really illustrate the human experience through that of a butterfly.
Mm.
And with that, it's heritage. It's going back to my roots. It's learning where I'm from. I've been learning and reading like Aztec poetry as well. And even in the Aztec poetry, I'm learning that the Aztecs believed that to die a good death, you would become a butterfly. And
Mm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like it just doesn't stop. And so since I've been on this journey, there have just been so many instances of butterflies. And I know there's some confirmation bias there as well, but like even something silly like going on a date with someone who ended up living on Mariposa Road. No, it's like, oh, what the heck?
Wow.
And while I was telling a friend I was about to go see this girl, like a butterfly just flies in the back of my head. And he points it out. He's like, there haven't been any butterflies, but as soon as you said that, this one just flew right past you. And I was like, dude, I can't make this up. Like, I don't even know what's going on.
Right.
I'm just going along for the ride. And so, um, and so I just visited the butterflies. I went for Day of the Dead again just this last November, last month, and I wanted to go to the sanctuary to see them as they're arriving and experience some Day of the Dead, indigenous celebrations,
Yes.
and
That must have been amazing.
it was incredible. Like that's what my poetry's been leading me to since I wrote my first poem, and because they've been my muse. That's like a lot of what I've been writing about. And but in some ways, like you expect it to be amazing, but to go off top, like on that a little bit, I got so lost in those expectations. I was like, this trip is going to give me everything I ever needed. I'm going to learn. I'm going to have clarity. I'm going to know what to do. And I get there and I'm like crumbling under these expectations. Like,
Mm,
oh man, like, and so it took out a lot of the fun for me. I was there for a little over a week and I put off going to the Monarch Sanctuary until my last day because I was so terrified of like failing myself. I was like, wow, everything's leading me here. What if I fail? And so I just get into this crazy imposter syndrome of like, what the hell am I even doing here following stupid butterflies? And
yes,
and so that's part of the journey. And so
it
that's
is.
when I learned that, you can't mistake a stop for the final destination. Everything's a stop.
Yes, I love that. That's a great quote. Um, you are also a death doula, which I've heard of before because my sister's friend does that as well. Can you tell our audience more about that and why you went into that field? What inspired it?
Yeah, so I'll start off. I'm very, very early into my death doula, what I want to do as a death doula. And what I'm learning with death doulas is that that's a way of life. It's it's unfortunate that we have to bring back the title of death doulas because humans have had death doulas doing that kind of work since people have been dying. But
Mm.
and by death doula, I mean specifically helping people transition into whatever's next, helping them transition out of this life, helping them die. And and I don't mean like euthanasia or, or anything like that. It's just
Yes.
helping people come to terms with dying. It's like we all came to die. We're going to die. There's no question about it. We just live in a society that constantly pushes that away. And even
Yes.
our doctors in our medical world is they're anti-death. It's like trying to keep us on these medicines as long as we could, essentially harvesting us until we
Yes.
breathe our last breath.
Even though
And
some
so
people really suffer from that and they go through so much and
yeah,
they
fighting death. It's like this is it. Let it go. And and
go.
there's something very magical that happens when someone is dying. They're inhabiting like an in-between realm that we can potentially get some access to, but we're so afraid of it. We don't want anything to do with it. Um, and the other thing I'll say is so I am very early into this, but um you don't need quality, you don't need certifications, you don't need education. What I'm learning is 90% of the job is making space, holding space to have those kinds of conversations and doing the work yourself. And I think since this has been falling more and more in place, becoming a death duel, it's like, oh, that was the seed the darkness retreat planted in me. This has been working for a long time. It was just waiting for me to realize it because that was a big way of doing my own work. Um, and even poetry is a big way of doing that work too, and just every day. Um, but that being said, what I plan to do with Death Doula work is I really just want to focus on the emotional, spiritual, and mental aspects that people go through before dying. Like I said, we're in such denial. I can't imagine how many people know they're dying and are afraid of dying, but equally afraid to talk about it.
Yes.
So that sounds like the worst possible existence to have as a last experience. And
Right.
so the first things I'm doing with that, I'll be beginning volunteering at some hospice soon here where I'm at in the Central Valley. And I'm creating a death plan for I'm creating like the format of a death plan so I can start to go over it with people. Um, the first person I'll be working with is one of my best friends. She's had cancer for about 6 years, And we've been talking about this for like over a year now. And it's like, why don't I do this to help you? Like, what the hell? It's like, yeah, let me help you. And so I'm coming up with like the outline of a death plan of as far as the questions to ask about, logistically, what do you want to happen to your body when you die? Do you want a service? Do you want anyone there? Um, if you do want a service, how do you want to celebrate? Some people are really colorful and saying like, I don't want anyone wearing black. I want this music. I've heard a death doula say, I want all my jewelry out there and I want everyone to take home something. And so it's like we can live with so much intention, we can die with so much intention. And
I
so
have goosebumps with you telling me that. Yeah, because I come from a culture and religion where it's like everyone wears black and it's
Mhm.
just so sad, even though the person's lived for almost 100 years. And I'm like, oh, gosh, shouldn't we be celebrating?
Yes.
Shouldn't we be? I
Yes.
wore white at one point with my dad when he passed away at one of his services. And I know people were looking at me like, what? But I'm like, he's in a much better place. He was suffering a lot here.
Mm. And was that because he was like prolonging it with medication and medicine
Well,
or?
yeah, he was in a coma and he
Oh.
had a stroke and he just suffered from depression and just suffered a lot in this lifetime.
Mm.
And I was like, he is. And when I see, that's why I love butterflies, is because when he had passed, a butterfly came and with my sister too, just flew by. And every time we think of him, it just flies
Mm.
by. So that's why and we have milkweed now in our, front yard because, I want to see those butterflies.
Exactly. That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So I
Um,
just love what that is because we have birth plans, like, right?
yeah, why wouldn't we
Why
do it
shouldn't there
leaving?
be? I feel, yeah, that and also transition. I love how you talk about that because I just did um a commission piece for a mom who lost her son to fentanyl poisoning. And I told her about how, it was a transition for him and she didn't understand. And so I explained it to her of what I think happens,
Hmm.
that we just, our souls, our spirits just transition somewhere else. Our body dies, but our soul, our spirit, she's like, I never thought of it that way. So
Wow.
you're causing people to think differently about death, about transitioning,
Yeah.
So
And
I think that's
that exact conversation is one of the most exciting ones I would look forward to. I am looking forward to talk to people is that I just can't imagine being afraid of like not knowing exactly, and I'm coming to a conclusion right now that whatever we intend, whatever we believe, like that's probably going to be the experience we have. There's no way whatever's in charge is going to let us be disappointed if we've lived our life according to something. Like I was listening to a podcast the other day with this death doula named Oceana Sawyer, and she was talking about a friend that had died at a meditation retreat. She wanted to learn to meditate before she died, and so she went on this retreat, and that's where she died. And that the instructor, the person in charge, he said he sensed the energy as like light, and he's like, I don't know how to say anything else other than that energy. It felt like Jesus to me. And it's like she was a Christian, and so it's like, yeah, that was her experience. And so even though they weren't
goosebumps again.
religious,
Chills. Okay.
oh, I get chills all the time talking and thinking about this, and it's like, and I'm glad that I got confidence in myself as a poet first, because I can't imagine if I came across this first. I'd be like, who am I to do that? I would have quit and walked away for sure. And so it's definitely just been building up slowly and slowly, and I'm getting to a place where I'm really excited to learn how to intersect poetry with death work, because poetry is an energy of its own. And
Yes.
so it would be so incredible to have these conversations and incorporate one-on-one poetry workshops with people or with families. It's like, what do you need to say while this person's still alive? What do you need to say to someone that you want to make amends with? And if like you're having trouble coming up with the words, let's let a poem move in that, and and bring out the words for you. Do you want to share it after you pass? I could share it with them. You can do it now. Whatever it is, let's just try to get some kind of expression out there while you're still here.
Oh, yeah. I love that. It's so if it's filled with so much love and creativity and art, and I think that's so important in life and in death, and transitioning, and yeah. Wow. And it's like the butterfly where you're going from this body, this cocoon, and it's your soul is free now, like that
Very
butterfly.
much.
So
Um, I've one big thing, really cool fact I forgot to share about butterflies that's loosely related is so I didn't know that it takes multiple generations for to complete the migration. So the butterflies who come back to North America from Mexico, the ones that initially left North America, it's like their great 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 grandparents. And so it's like, how do they know how to get back home? It's like they inherited the maps from their ancestors on how to get there. And so for me, I was like, whoa, that's generational trauma. That's generation, like, no one, that's how it works. Like, that's how we can see it very easily with butterflies. And it's like, that's how it is with us too. But our lives are just so long, it's really hard to comprehend that. But I think there's been a lot more awareness of more and more people saying, like, with generational trauma, like, these are things we're holding on from generations past that we need to heal. And I think it's very powerful. That's the real healing that we need.
100%. Wow. Did you ever have any fears or limiting beliefs in becoming a poet?
Oh yeah. Of course. Like, I don't yeah, I had started up in corporate, like I had done the Peace Corps because I was like, yeah, there's a lot of adventure here. I wasn't a poet then, but after that, it was all corporate, and like that's the last thing you would want to go in as a corporate, especially in sales. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like everyone. I would tell some coworkers or some people at work, and it's like, you're gonna quit to write poems, like to write poetry, like what? It's like, wait, what am I doing? Yeah, you're right. And well, first, I don't suggest anyone to quit just to write poems. Like, I had a plan and I had some savings and I'm
Yes.
chilling for a little bit. Thankfully, sales gave me that. And in a lot of ways, I think it worked out for me because I was able to learn the business before the art. And so now that I have the art, I'm not super terrified of going out there, just kind of blindfolded. But yeah, I think I kind of touched on that question a little earlier with uh, going to Alex Benayan's meetup in LA earlier this year in July, because that was when I fully jumped into it. And it's like, yeah, this is it. Like, there's no going back. Like, I'm a poet now forever. And what I'm learning about myself with that is that poetry, being a poet's my identity. Like, I am a human. So that doesn't necessarily mean I need to be a poet for a career, because no matter what I do, the poet in me will be influencing that. And that's like the same with Death Doula. It's just like kind of like a part of your identity. And so I think before the call, that's where I was saying, like, all these things are just coming together in my life, and it's like I'm getting ideas on how to finally incorporate them. And yeah, so I think I answered your question, but I
Yeah.
don't have any qualms about being a poet now or being an artist now. It's just inherent in who I am.
I love it. And can you read one of your poems to us?
Yeah. Do you want to hear the one that I had shared with you before? Or do you want to hear one about the dark room?
Uh, whichever one you're called to read.
I'll share the original one just
The
because
original?
it's more on par with what we're doing with this podcast.
Awesome. Yes, do it.
Uh, yeah. So I'm still working on the title, but I think the title is the title of my podcast, Art to Heart. Okay. I've been thinking about purpose, about life, and how to be of service. I've spent decades searching, but finally, my passion is burning. These rhymes and lines ignite it. Even if I tried, I couldn't fight it. I've always counted syllables in my head. As a child, I'd read lyrics for hours in bed, yet never once considered, hey, maybe I can write my own shit instead. I didn't think I was worthy of being remembered after I was dead. You see, I had eyes that loved to seek, but a voice that couldn't speak because my silence refused to listen to a heart that so desperately wanted to glisten. So I spent years in between the smiles, in between the traveling and the miles. I'd go anywhere and be with anyone so I'd never be alone. But loving everywhere and everyone but me never felt like home. So I drew a line and traded my quicksand for a stone. I returned to the darkness, infinity's most ancient throne. I asked it who I was. It said, you're a poet. Now go back home. And now I'm learning what it means to be a poet. Life plants in me a seed and trusts me to grow it, but I only receive from the divine because I believe I can show it. Because our world is being ripped apart, but I know we can sew it. We can pick up the hearts and mend them together. We'll fill in the cracks with hope to embrace any weather. I pray rain pours blessings over all the land. Please flood our fears and ground them into sand so we can grab our pain to watch it fall through our fingers. To let it all go and not let it linger. We'd be one with the ocean and all that has drowned, getting lost in our truth, yet never needing to be found. Your pain remembers you too. But it's waiting to know it's one with you. You don't have to avoid it or destroy it. The point is to transform it, to turn it into something new, to allow it to be the most beautiful part of you. If I could help everyone write a poem, I would. I'd open their eyes that they'd see they could, but I never want them to feel like they should. Poetry is one of infinite ways to express all of the truth and desire buried behind your chest. You were born with a voice. Whether you use it is the ultimate choice. You are capable of wonders you'll never conceive. Inside your expression is the magic to receive. So dive into your hurt and get in touch with your art, because if we all feel our truths, well, then together we can heal every heart. Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
It was nice to hear it again because, the first time you hear it, it's, you don't take it all in like you'd like to. And then the second time you really feel it and, take it in even more. So
thank you. I was a little nervous this time around, but I think it was still good.
Yeah, because you're on camera and audio and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, thank you so much for letting me share that.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think I missed a couple of lines, but it's all right.
Amazing. Oh, I wouldn't.
Exactly. That's the cool thing about poetry and any art, I guess, but no one knows when you mess up unless you're rehearsing a very famous piece or something.
No one knows. And what words of wisdom do you have for all the creative spirits out there?
Oh, I've been thinking about this and I feel very unequipped to answer just because I don't know. I'm so new in my journey and it's like, man, what the hell can I say? But that was like that doubt creeping in again, And so what's helped me and what the advice I would give is to just spend more time with your art, spend more time with it, treat it like a friend, treat it like a family member. It's a part of you. And I think, like you said, you had practiced art for a while before you had the courage to share it and to speak up for it and claim it. And I think the more time we spend with it, the more comfortable we become with it.
Yes.
Because a lot of people will just create and then just hide it. It's like they'll put it like in a closet of shame for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, of course that art's not going to want to take over your life if you're not going to allow it to. And so, and when I say spend more time with it, I mean, like, yeah, exactly like a friend, like take a piece and go eat, go out with it, like put it across from you, take a look at it. I mean, I don't draw, all I do is poems. So for me, what how I practice that is um I'll rehearse my poems and I'll record myself reciting the poems, and then I'll listen to them. I'll listen to them when I drive, I'll listen to them when I'm doing whatever. But it took a while for me to be okay with just listening to my own voice, but it was a relationship with the art I was developing.
Which I have noticed doing these podcasts, a lot of people, and I also, when I first started, have a hard time listening to themselves speak. So I think it's great that you practice that and you do that. So you get used to it and it's not so strange, um and people beat themselves up over it, or they're like, wow, I don't like the way I sound. But that's your
And
special, unique voice.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's your voice. You have to. And funny enough, I think my sales career really helped me with that because I would listen to myself pitch like my pitches and my scripts and whatever. I would listen to myself and critique myself. And so I don't know if I would have been readily available to do that with art if I didn't have that experience before, but that's what works for me.
Right. And that isn't that amazing too, how we think, oh, it took me this long to get to where I am, but I feel like all those things we did before has led us to where we are now. It's prepared us for it. And
100%.
yes, and because it took me as long as you too to figure out, like, no, I love being an artist and being in this world. But it took me having other experiences and learning from them to get to that point. And if I didn't have those experiences, I don't think I would be where I am now, or
Mm.
maybe it would just look a bit more different. I don't know. So I'm just grateful for having that time to be
And so
here.
would you change that or would you leave it exactly the way it was?
I thought I would. And now when I look back, because I was around 33 when I realized I want to teach art, and then around 35 when I became a professional artist. And no, I wouldn't, because I wasn't ready when I was in my 20s.
Mm.
I wasn't mature enough. And I just didn't have all the life skills and the experiences and even the pain. So a lot of that pain and struggle led me to where I am now and creating what I create now.
It's our version of our roaring 20s. Like 20s
Yeah.
are so full of pain and lessons. And I'm the same. I think if I would have discovered that I was a poet earlier, I wouldn't be a poet. I would just be a dude who writes poems. And that's not to take away. I think if anyone who writes poems is a poet, but as far as just really taking on the identity and letting that be the driving force of how I live. And so who knows? I'd be more lost if I would have found it sooner. Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? And I just feel like those experiences build a foundation, a stronger foundation. And then you have this sturdier, I guess, home space to create.
Yeah. Yeah. Every detour matters. So I was saying, like, it's always every stop matters. It's all part of the journey.
It's all part of the journey. So I'm proud of you for um, doing everything you've done and for claiming being a poet. And I'm so happy we were introduced and I'll give a shout out again to Asal Dean, who introduced us. And she's been on my podcast twice, and wonderful
No, she's
gratitude
incredible. Thank you so
coach.
much, Asal, for introducing us.
So, yeah, to many more creative endeavors to you. And I wish you so much success. And thank you for being here with me. And it's been a pleasure. I could go on for another hour with you.
Well, we'll do it offline. I'll have to interview you for my podcast.
That would be
Yeah.
great. It would be an honor. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.